Like the long-range LR, the Electronic Instrument System EIS of the A320 consists of two subsystems. The Electronic Flight Instrument System EFIS with two PFDs and two NDs, the Electronic Centralized Aircraft Monitoring System ECAM with an upper and a lower display unit. The symbology, the color coding and the philosophy are similar for both aircraft. There are just some differences that we will cover in this module. First, let's compare the A320 EIS architecture with that of the long range. Like on the long range, there are three identical display management computers, DMCs, implemented on the A320. These process data from the ADIRs, the FMGES and system sensors and generate the images to be displayed. Each DMC has two independent channels, an EFIS channel and an ECAM channel. DMC EFIS and ECAM channels can be transferred independently through one EFIS DMC selector and one ECAM DMC selector. These selectors will be seen later on in this module. In normal operations, DMC3 is used as backup. Note, one DMC can supply information to 3 CRTs instead of 6 on the long range. Let's continue this module by presenting the EFIS controls. Outboard of the PFDs, there are control knobs to adjust the brightness of the associated PFD and ND weather radar image, or to turn the display off. Just next to the ECAM lower display, on top of the pedestal, an ECAM switching panel is installed for use in abnormal situations to restore data to the ECAM and EFIS displays. On the A320, one EFIS DMC selector is mounted to allow the pilots to manually select the data source. On the long range, two DMC selectors are mounted to each outboard side of the cockpit for manual selection. Each pilot also has an EFIS control panel to select what is displayed on the EFIS screens. This panel is very similar to the one on the long range. There are just two differences to note. On A320 EFIS, the engine main parameter display mode does not exist. The long range LS push-button label, anticipating other systems than ILS on A320, still remains the ILS push-button label. However, the push-buttons have the same function. On the PFD speed scales, the only difference between the two aircraft is that on the A320 speed scale, there is no rotation speed VR indication available. On the ECAM control panel, ECP, there are two differences you can notice. The first one is that on the A320, one electrical key is fitted only instead of two for AC and DC on the long range. The second difference is that on the A320, the circuit breaker CB ECAM system page is not available. CBs are in the cockpit. Thus, 11 systems can be selected on A320 rather than 13 on A330, A340. Normally, DMC1 supplies the captain's PFD, ND and the upper ECAM screen. DMC2 supplies the first officer's PFD, ND and the lower ECAM screen. DMC3 is on standby and can replace DMC1 or DMC2. Let's see what happens if DMC1 should fail. When DMC1 fails, the captain's PFD and ND data is lost, along with the upper ECAM screen. Since the captain no longer has information on his primary flight instruments, he should normally hand over the controls to the first officer. Notice that all three displays have a diagonal white line generated. The white lines indicate that the displays are working but are not receiving any image data from DMC. As soon as the ECAM system detects a DMC1 failure, it generates the appropriate standard sequence of alerts. Level 2 warning. Notice that the engine warning display has automatically transferred to the lower ECAM screen and is now receiving information from DMC2. So that you can carry out the ECAM procedure, we will bring up the lower part of the engine warning display and the switching panel for you. The ECAM procedure requires Captain 3 selection on the EIS DMC switch located on the switching panel. DMC3 now supplies information to the three missing displays, and the engine warning display is automatically transferred back to the upper ECAM display. Thus, the normal display sequence has been recovered. If a single display unit fails, there are several ways that the EIS can be reconfigured to ensure that the pilots have all the information that they need. Let's look at several cases of this. If a PFD screen fails, the screen will be blank. There is no white diagonal line, since this is a screen failure, not a loss of data. Because the PFD has priority, the EIS will automatically transfer the PFD to the remaining screen. If an ND fails, there is no automatic transfer. If required, the PFD-ND transfer switch can be used to manually transfer navigation information to the remaining screen. Should a failure of the upper ECAM display screen occur, there is an automatic transfer of the engine warning display to the lower ECAM screen. Like the PFD, the engine warning display has priority over the SD. If an aircraft system or the aircraft status is to be called up, the SD may be transferred to one of the ND screens using the ECAM ND transfer switch on the switching panel. However, the system push button on ECP can be kept depressed for a system review on lower ECAM display as well. By selecting the ECAM ND transfer selector to First Officer, the SD has been transferred to the First Officer's FO ND screen. Notice that the ND is replaced by the SD. It is not transferred. Normal selection of system pages is then available via the ECP.